Hello, bonjour. Welcome to Pardon Our French with Quincy and Justine. This is our COVID episode.
Yes, ma'am.
In French, la COVID, but le virus.
I hope you agree that la COVID is bullcrap.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. But we will be talking about our experiences because I was in France when the first lockdown fell. Justine was still in the U.S. at this point. Mm-hmm. And then she arrived right before the third lockdown, third and final. Yeah, so in France, the lockdown started, we just looked, it was March 15th?
Yes. The confinement.
The confinement, yes. I actually, the week before, because I think I had said in our intro episode that I had decided to stay in France and everyone in my program left. So the week before the confinement fell, I actually ended up going to Budapest by myself on this trip that I was supposed to go on with some Columbia friends. And I, naively was like, oh, I don't know how difficult it's going to be to travel, so I should go.
Which you were right, because it was difficult.
Yeah, I was very right. And I went and I had a fantastic trip.
Is this the trip where you shipped yourself wine?
This is the trip, yes. Because we were supposed to do a wine tasting. And so I obviously still went. And then, I did have a case of Hungarian sparkling wine shipped to the Columbia Center in Paris.
Great.
I just had no qualms doing that. I was like, I'm the only one left here. I'm sending myself some of this sparkling wine. And I came back and the confinement was about to begin. I was lucky enough to have some family friends here. They actually have an immunocompromised daughter. And so they were saying, we're going to go out of Paris. We're going to leave because it's just too risky. And they had kind of talked with my parents and they were like, oh, it would make us more comfortable if Quincy went with you because
she'll be alone?
Yeah, I'll be alone in my 28 square meter apartment. So I did go with them, and I spent the first confinement, or confinement, with them outside of Paris in Chablis, which was
nice.
Pas mal du tout, I have to say. But we were, at the beginning, we had to write these attestation de, what is it called? Déplacement dérogatoire.
Yeah.
And you basically have to log where you're going, what time you're leaving, because you were only allowed to leave your house for 1 hour at a time. Mm-hmm. And it had to be within 1 kilometer of your house as well.
Yeah.
So you could, and that's, for people who don't do kilometers, that's about a 15-minute walk. It was, at the beginning it was scary because in Europe, especially, I think Italy was the first real epicenter of it.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are dying.
Yeah, it was really
everywhere,
scary.
But it was really, I think it hit Europe a lot sooner than it hit the U.S. And then they actually traced back the first case of COVID to Paris, and it was December 2019.
Yeah.
Things did open up in May, so I think we were under the first confinement for about 55 days.
Yeah.
Things opened up. I returned to Paris. I was so eager to be back in the city that I actually went for a run.
Wow.
Which is unheard of for me because I have terrible knees.
Were people out at that time?
People were out. People were dying to be out.
Yeah.
You tell Parisians not to do something, they want to do it. So the final,
Tell me again.
tell me again not to go on my walk. Because in French, you have this word called, or a verb, flâner.
Yeah.
Which you can probably give more context to it. But essentially, to me, it means just to sort of go on a walk with no certain purpose or anything, but just to enjoy, just to experience the walk.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a cultural
I think
staple.
That's a big thing too, because Paris is such it's a city, right? So 1 kilometer around you can find whatever you need technically, from groceries and stuff.
Yeah.
I know that in California it was by county, so really you had a large range of where you could go. And so I was still going to the beach. I was literally driving all the way to the beach and having beach days.
Oh my gosh.
And people gave zero fucks. Really. I did give fucks. I got super anal about disinfecting everything that came into our home. I didn't want to get near people, but I did still go out and live a little bit of my life without interacting too much with others around me.
Yeah.
It was also a time for me where, because we didn't live in a city and I had more freedom, I got to reconnect with myself again. I talked about this before. I had been in a really toxic relationship. I had just gotten out of it 3 months prior. So really getting close to my roommates, to myself, learning who I was again, doing a bunch of stuff together with, I was so thankful to live in a house with 4 people. I can't imagine what it was like for you to live alone.
Yeah.
I think if I had been living alone, my experience would have been so different.
Totally. Yeah.
But I was working as an office manager at the time for a co-working center. So obviously that was not the place to be.
Yeah.
I got furloughed early on. And my roommates, Elor and Gabe, who were engaged at the time, were working remotely from home because they had that opportunity. And my other roommate, Kira, was a nurse, fully working overtime in hospitals, treating COVID patients.
That's so intense.
Yeah, I honestly, like, all my love to her because I don't know how she did that. She was working so much. And then it also made me scared because she was around COVID patients all the time. But essentially my routine was like, I was just the child of the house doing nothing. I would wake up before everyone, which was actually, no, that's a lie. Gabe and Laura would get up at 6 a.m. to start working, which I don't know how they did that.
Jeez.
But I'd wake up, I'd make breakfast for them. Kira would be working, so I never really got to do that for her. But they would go to work and I would go for my walk. I would work out after my walk. I think I was in the best shape I'd ever been in my life because I filled my time up with working out.
That was the first time I consistently worked out was during COVID as well.
Yeah. Because it fills your time.
Yeah, and you're like, what else am I going to do?
Yeah,
I'm sitting around the house.
Yeah. I remember I'd go on like 2 or 3 walks a day in my neighborhood. And I was super lucky to have a neighborhood that was basically like hiking trails because I was on the outskirts in LA. I had never seen so many people from my neighborhood walking. Like that was crazy. Like everybody was out for walks. And then I would come home. I would make lunch for everyone. They'd go back to work. And then I would paint. I think I spent every single day painting. I ended up starting like selling my paintings, which was awesome. And I know that amazing. Lucy, our other friend, also did that during COVID. Mm-hmm. It just rekindled that creative spark. And at 5 p.m., cocktails were ready.
Happy hour has begun.
They would come downstairs. I'd have our little cocktail. I bought a bar cart during that time. Like I didn't have it before.
Your bar cart is a masterpiece.
Oh, here, yes. It was not as nice in LA.
As this one? Okay.
But this one is like elite because, the brocants here are something. But yeah, we would do that. We would watch, we'd have our little dinner outside, either paint together also or talk, have light chats, or be watching TV. Like we watched Outer Banks, Tiger King, Love Island.
Yeah. I don't know if you did this at all, or I guess it wouldn't have been as much of a necessity, but during COVID, like one of the things that I did that I don't think I would have done normally is that I did like FaceTime like wine nights with people.
Oh, that's so fun.
Who, normally if you're living your life and you're busy, you don't necessarily like catch up with that type of people. But it was like people who I hadn't spoken to or caught up with in so long. And because it was sort of more normalized to have to do things remotely or do things like that, I would like just call people up and say, hey, let's schedule a wine night. And we would catch up. Nice. And it was people who I hadn't, talked to in years. And it was kind of like a nice way to rekindle things.
That is really nice. I think because I had people around me all the time, I did that less.
Yeah.
I did have one like little high school reunion with my friends from high school where we played games online because that was like a whole thing. At least they were doing that all the time. I had never done it, but we were playing like those online games where you all kind of log on and you're playing against each other.
And didn't they have like Netflix watching party things?
I never did that.
I never did that, but it sounds like it could have been fun.
Yeah, I think it could have been fun. Yeah, I think that was the only other person I would FaceTime was my therapist. But shout out to you because you really saved me during those dark times.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then eventually Elora and Gabe got furloughed as well, and then they broke up, which was sad, but I think for the best. And Elora and I started our road trips around California because I wanted to get her out of the environment of like, I just broke up. Like that was our breakup house. Everybody in that house got broken up with or broke up with someone in that year. And we were just either in LA going to the beach at my parents' house in Mountain View or dog sitting in cool California and our good family friend's house that had like acres of land in the middle of nature. And it was...
That sounds so nice.
So nice. Like, honestly, some of the best memories I have, I think.
That's amazing.
But
yeah. That sounds like so... I'm having a hard time like imagining all of that happening during COVID because everything here was so strict.
Yeah.
I really didn't like let myself kind of go outside of I know tons of people were, not respecting all the rules and stuff, but it was harder for me, at the start at least.
No,
I eventually did, start to give less fucks, or fewer fucks, but
also you're alone breaking them. I was breaking them with people, so it felt less intimidating.
Exactly.
And I guess like cool for those of you who don't know, California is like kind of like the redneck parts of California. So people really did not give fucks. Like there are people with like Trump stickers on their cars saying like COVID's a scam, things like
Yikes.
that. So we were following more rules than they were, but
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
No, that was very different. I am kind of a rule follower, so at the beginning I would literally stay within the 1 kilometer because I'm just, but then by
Also, the fine was like 135 euros. Like,
it was,
I'm not trying to...
It was. And so around the second confinement, which started, so we basically had the summer that was more open. And then the second confinement fell in late October of 2020.
Yeah,
that was a tough time.
That's wild because I talked in the last episode about visiting TikTok boy.
Yeah.
And when I was in Paris visiting my family and my school that I was going to go to, and that was like open Paris. And I know that, and like at the time in the US, at least in California, things were still closed down. Like there weren't people out at restaurants and stuff. Like you had to take it out and take it home. And like the only things open were like grocery stores.
Yeah.
And then I came to Paris and everything was open. People were out on terraces. And I was like, oh my gosh, just give me life. I can't wait to come here. And literally the day I left, the second confinement started. And I was like, whoa, thank God.
Yeah, you're very lucky. I stayed in Paris for the second confinement, and it was really tough.
Mm-hmm.
I was living alone at that point.
In the winter,
and I was doing all my classes. Yeah, I was doing all my classes online from New York.
Mm-hmm.
So my classes would go until about 10 p.m. And we had a curfew at 6 p.m. So if I didn't go out to get my groceries for dinner before then, it was like, okay, you're kind of screwed because you couldn't go out of the house after 6 p.m. At 8, people would come out of their windows and applaud and kind of cheer on the frontline workers, which I thought was really great. But that was a really hard time. I was not doing so well during that time.
I mean, all your friends had left.
That's the thing. I was truly, and I was very alone. Yeah. All the people I knew left. And again, 1 kilometer, you're very limited. I would go out on sort of like a mental health walk every day, at least once, and go to the gardens. I did eventually dépasse the 1 kilometer, and I ventured out to the Jardin des Tuileries.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So far.
Daredevil. And then, of course, you would see the police like riding around on their like packs of 6 of them on their bikes, which I can't take seriously. It reminds me too much of like Mall Cop.
The rollerblades.
Or the rollerblades. Yeah. But they would start to approach people and ask for their attestation.
Yeah.
Like literally ask to show your paper.
To see your address and stuff.
Yeah. And so I would just quietly close my book and like casually get up and stroll out the other, side of the park. But I was stopped once the whole time. I was stopped once. It was during the third confinement, which started in January of 2021. That's when you arrived.
Yeah, that was right when I arrived.
That was when you arrived. During COVID, because there were no restaurants open and all this, people would go out and would, be gathering on the quai of the Seine, in the gardens, the parks, and drinking and doing all this stuff. And so they actually made it illegal to drink in public, which normally in France is allowed.
Yeah, so you can imagine how that went.
Yeah, that did not go over so well. And so you weren't allowed to drink in public. And so I was actually down on the quai with a friend having some beers. And it was 7 p.m. So we were an hour past curfew already. And the police officers came marching up to us. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do? We had actually been speaking English. And so we just turned around, and it was just kind of natural to say like, oh, hi.
Yeah.
And that completely disarmed them.
Oh.
They kind of like, their puffed chests just kind of like settled down a little bit. And they were like, well, it's time to, and I was like, oh my God, is it already? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Time just flies. We're hiding the beer bottles because that would have been a whole other fine. Yeah. So we're like tucking those under our coats, and you're just like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like we got up and we like strolled away.
Yeah.
But we got to,
yeah,
it was okay. But they would do traffic stops because I was guilty of this a lot. I would Uber over to a friend's house and do like a whole evening.
Yeah.
At someone's house.
An Uber back,
yes. one of my friends did live right next to a police station, so I'd always have myself dropped off like 2 blocks away, and then I would just kind of peep around the corner to check.
I definitely photoshopped mine all the time about my addresses. I'd have like 6 different attestations, depending on where I was going.
Yeah, literally.
And then I got really lucky because when second lockdown started in France, it like stopped in the US. And so I was literally road tripping around with my roommates. And I was so thankful to have roommates during lockdowns.
Yeah, I was very alone. I basically, this is kind of a funny anecdote, but every time something exciting would happen, I would buy a bottle of Veuve Clicquot. And often I was by myself. I'd probably drink all of it at some point. But for the 2020 election, my friend Amin was going to come over, and we were going to celebrate that Biden won. And he actually got stopped by the police on his way to my house and got sent home.
Wow.
And so, but basically each time something happened, so like, when I passed my C1 French, language level exam, and when I did this, when I finished, whatever it was, winning the election, all these things, I would buy the bottle, and then I would peel off the label and put it in this scrapbook and, write down what it was.
Is so freaking cute. I wish I was that creative to have thought about that. That's so cute.
But it was just
I drank a lot during lockdowns. I can say that was probably the most I ever drank in my life.
I actually also went on a couple FaceTime dates with people I met, which was very interesting.
I went on real dates, so...
Yeah, I went on some FaceTime dates. What an experience that was. That's so bizarre.
Very interesting.
So bizarre. I did also, at that time, I feel like people were a bit more open to coming up to you in public because there was like no way to meet people. And so if I had been reading in, the garden, people would come up and try to talk to me.
That is true, actually, because we talked about how French people in general don't really approach you to like meet people, but during that time I will say
I was approached quite often.
During I was only there for the third confinement, but I definitely was approached a lot more and like complimented on the streets like by people whom I would actually maybe speak to. So
it was very interesting. But I think the biggest thing culturally is that in the US, the culture of going out and having drinks outside and having tables outside was a very new thing in COVID. But with France, that's like culturally so central already. And so it was a very natural thing to do. And so when we didn't have that, I remember doing this with you.
That was so depressing.
It was, first of all, it was so depressing to like look at all these closed cafes.
Yeah.
But then I remember there was this place in the 6th, what was it called?
Rue de Bussy.
Yeah, on Rue de Bussy. And they would put out a card table, and you could go up to the card table and order, I'm pretty sure it was just beers.
No, they had cocktails. I had a
They
spritz.
did? Okay. I did not remember that. But you would go up and you'd order your cocktail at the card table. They would send, the waitress inside, and there would be a bartender there. But that was pretty much it.
They did to-go drinks pretty much.
Yeah, just to-go drinks. And then people would stand on the street because it was kind of like
We'd assemble outside.
Yeah, we'd
Even though we weren't allowed.
Yeah. The whole thing was shut down.
And when that first started, by the way, thousands of people were out.
Yeah.
Thousands.
Yeah.
I remember like
Packed
holding my
street.
breath when I would like pass by sometimes because I was so freaked out. And then I was like, fuck it. Whatever.
Yeah. So one of these times when we were there, we met these...
Well, first of all, we didn't even meet them. We were I'm not going to lie, we were kind of scouting out. We were like, we're going to go out, we're going to see if there's cute guys.
Yeah.
Because like we were still like trying to date. I don't know. That was like the whole like culture of putting like, I'm vaccinated on my like, whatever, on the dating apps. And we were scouting out and we had like spotted a few cute people. And then this man who was just not well.
Yeah, he was bothering us, and these guys essentially took notice.
Yeah, and they helped us they like pretended to know us so that he would leave us alone.
Yeah.
And they came, and then so we started chatting with them.
The curfew was about to hit.
Yes, that's true. And then I had to pee. There were no toilets available because obviously things were closed, or like, they were closed off for sanitary reasons.
Yes, you literally had to go home.
Yeah, if you ever dépassed, like went over your 1 kilometer thing, which at that point I think was over.
Yeah, it was 20 kilometers at that point, which includes all of Paris.
So I would go to the other side of Paris and there would be no fucking bathrooms. And I have the world's smallest bladder. So mix that with a fucking spritz or two and it hits you. And you're like, holy shit, I'm about to pee my pants. And like no one would let you use their restroom.
Yeah.
So Quincy lived nearby.
Yeah, so we're talking with these guys and we were getting along quite well. And Justine and I, we were basically the only people we knew.
Yep.
And we also just, you have to paint the picture of there's literally no social activity going on at this point. We don't know anyone. Things are dead. And so meeting 3 people who you get along with and kind of click with, it was exciting. It was fun. It was, it felt like a breath of fresh air. And so in a very spontaneous way,
we invited them over.
We invited them to my apartment.
Yes.
And we picked up some things at the store on the way there. And then we went back to my apartment, kind of hung out with them there, which was...
It literally stood by your one window, I think, for 4 hours.
Yeah.
I think I didn't move. Just outside the window drinking with these people. And we just blasted music and we're like dancing and chatting.
With these people we just met.
Yeah.
What a time.
So funny.
It was so funny.
So that was maybe not the smartest idea. But it was fun and it's one for the books. One of them was a metro driver. He was like, I gotta go at 1 a.m. because I gotta go drive the metro.
He was on the metro during COVID. I think the point of the story goes to show how, honestly desperate for, human connection we were.
Because if you know us today, that would never happen.
It would never happen.
No, that would never happen.
I watch way too much true crime to, not have stranger danger. Yeah. So, that would never happen under normal circumstances.
That's the thing about COVID is stranger danger eliminated. I went on so many dates during COVID. And, because you couldn't go anywhere, you just go to each other's houses or to a public place. I mean, Jean and I, we went on a walk on our first date.
Yeah.
From freaking Bestie to the Louvre. Which I don't know how many kilometers that would be or miles, but it's a nice hour walk maybe.
Yeah.
And then he was like, well, do you want to come over? And I was like, well, I've done it before, obviously, but I was joking with him. I was like, you're not going to kidnap me, are you? We were joking about that.
Oh my God.
And I went over to his house, on our first date. Yeah. And that's just so weird to think about it. Because now when we talk about how we met, I feel so
Oh, to say that and to say, I went over to his house on the first date.
But then at the time, it felt so normal because, you had no other choices, really. I don't know.
So
maybe you do have a choice, and I was just extreme. But I feel like people kind of let their guards down a little bit with that.
And so we're all going through the same thing. We're all adjusting. We're all, trying to figure out how to live a life but not endanger ourselves or other people. And it was a hard time, but it was I feel like it was a time when people were a bit more open to connection because things were tough.
Yeah, they were.
So when things finally started to open up and the vaccine was being rolled out in France, they made this app called, what was it called?
Anti-COVID.
Anti-COVID. And you would basically, because when we got vaccinated, we would get a QR code. And so you would scan the QR code and that would go into your app and you would basically just show that at a restaurant.
And you had to show it to eat there.
Yeah, you had to show it. And if you didn't have a vaccine, you would have to test every other day to go sit down at a restaurant.
Yeah, and you couldn't be more than 6 people at a table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I mean, it was honestly, the pass sanitaire was very advanced compared to what was in the U.S. I actually did get vaccinated in the U.S. because I was there in April of 2021 for my college graduation, which was online, of course.
Yeah.
But I got vaccinated at the Javits Center in New York. Shout out. But just because the rollout was a bit behind in Europe, so I wouldn't have gotten the vaccine for a lot longer.
Yeah, in the U.S., the opportunity to get vaccinated was way before we ever got it in France.
Yeah, they were rolling it out later. I guess we just didn't have access to it until a bit later on. So I did get vaccinated first in the U.S. And
they were prioritizing people.
Yes. So I had to go to a center in France and get them to convert my U.S. vaccine to the French. And you can imagine, I mean, we just talked about bureaucracy a couple episodes. So you can imagine how fun that was. But there was actually a woman who was willing to play ball, and she essentially faked one for me because she was like, you're lucky. The day you got vaccinated was the first day we opened this center. And so I'm just going to say that you got it then. And then, your second vaccine was going to be now or whatever. And so she made it for me and it was amazing. So but it was also hard because I didn't have a social security number at the time.
Oh.
And so then when I got my next round, they were so confused.
Also in France, the vaccines rolled out a lot later, but also because French people are such rebellious people, many people did not want the vaccine. They were like, I'm not putting that shit in me. And it wasn't
Yeah.
political at all. It was just like French people are rebels. Like they just won't do what
Yeah, they don't like being told what to do.
Yeah.
A lot of people also didn't want to download the anti-COVID and put their information in
it
an
tracked
app.
you also.
Because it would track you. And so if you pass by someone who tested positive,
It would
tell you. And people didn't want their personal information in there.
Yeah.
I think that is also...
Or their location followed.
Yeah, their location. But that, I feel like, is also kind of at a core of French culture as well.
And then we started being able to travel within Europe.
Yes, that was
And
great.
you also had to get tested before and have the vaccine. And they had different laws in different places. We went to Italy. I went to Greece. We had to pay like 90 euros to get a test before our flight because you had to have a test.
Yeah, and at the beginning, the turnaround times were so inconsistent.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, we'll get this back to you. And it's like, well, will you today or tomorrow or the day after?
I remember being in the U.S., so for Christmas of 2020, I finally went home. And basically when I was going back to France at the end of December, beginning of January, there were no tests in the U.S. And I, at my like patient care, whatever it's called, they're like, oh, well, the turnaround time is 3 weeks. I'm like, well, by the time I get the test back, if it was positive, I'll be negative by that time. It'll have cleared my system.
That's so true.
And so I had to pay, I think I ended up paying $500 to get a test that was guaranteed to come back in 24 hours so that I could get on the plane to come back to France.
Yeah, I did. I remember paying like 100 something for a test.
Insane.
Just for flight. And it had to be an international test. You couldn't just do any test. It had to be a test to travel internationally. Because I went back to the U.S. in May of 2021. That was wild. I forgot about that. And it was like so stressful. You had to go and be like, am I going to get this in time to make my plane?
Yeah, I remember getting one code back from France, from a French lab, like 20 minutes before I was like going into the airport. I was like, thank God, because then you have to, you can't get on your flight.
That's
I'm sure people were
Yeah.
photoshopping and things like that, but
100%.
I don't have it in me to do that.
In France especially, people fucking Photoshop their passes all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's harder. You couldn't Photoshop the
QR.
the pass sanitaire because it's a QR code that you would scan.
Yeah.
But
well, people used each other's.
how?
You just screenshot somebody else's QR.
That's really weird.
Yeah, people do that. Like, French people are rebels. They'll do anything. That was, like, a crazy start to my Parisian adventure. And I guess kind of yours, too, is, like...
Yeah, and it's the reason why I'm able to be here today, because if COVID hadn't happened, I would have just gone back to New York. I would have done my senior year in New York.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
I probably would have just been working in New York at this time. I don't think I would have done a master's. I don't think we wouldn't have met.
Yeah. I mean, there are some silver linings for sure.
Definitely.
There's some funny memories from COVID now that I can go back, like things that you can laugh about now that were not so great then.
Yeah. I look back, not a lot, but it has happened. And I think it just makes me very like thankful for everything that I've built since then in Paris. You know, the friends, the job, just everything that I have done, because it's really, truly building a life from scratch. And to have to do that through a global pandemic is just another level that I don't think you can replicate.
No.
How difficult that was.
Yeah, absolutely not.
But from that comes so much strength.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like friendships just got deeper quicker because you got to relate on really tough topics, like from the start. You spent so much time together.
Yeah, definitely some tough times overall, but I think we had a lot of silver linings between the two of us. Definitely our wonderful friendship that came out of COVID, and
being in Paris,
exactly, the fact that we're even here today. So we're very thankful despite, how tough it was. And that concludes for today. Next week, we will be talking about summer in Paris, both what we are up to, but then also some of our recommendations and insider tips if you are coming to visit sometime soon.
And so on that note, à bientôt.
Au revoir.